Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Monday the 8th of April. And joining me in this edition, Kaz Harlow.
I'm fireproof.
Mark Botwright.
I am not pure of heart.
And Ed Selley.
I'm going to be sore in the morning.
It's usually Mark that comes up with the good ones, but yeah, that's a good one, Ed. Yeah, prizes for people if they can guess which film that was.
I think you can probably work it out.
Yeah, I'm sure they will work it out. Yeah, it's been another busy week. Steve's not here. We don't know why. He's just not here. So instead, we've got the B team. I don't mean that, obviously.
You're f***ing in it, so...
Very true, Ed. Some would say the C team. Anyway, what's everybody been up to? We haven't heard from Mark for a couple of weeks. So, Mark, what's been going on?
Had my wisdom tooth out.
Oh,
Yay.
excellent.
Yay.
Can you chew?
I'm now back to at least having food that seems to resemble actual food.
Excellent.
Yes. I've spent the past week kind of eating and drinking. Have you ever seen like how a parrot kind of picks up water in its beak and then knocks its head back?
Yeah.
That's basically what I've been doing.
And it's usually to the opposite side, isn't it? To where the tooth is.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. Also, I got a little bit. I thought I'd be smart when I came home. I thought, you know what? I'll drink through a straw. And then I read a thing saying, actually, no, that's the worst thing you can do. And I thought, and I did that terrible thing of Googling, kind of symptoms and what could go wrong.
Cancer.
And it starts off with, you know what, you'll probably be fine as long as you don't use a straw. And I'm thinking, okay, right, well, that's a bit annoying. And it's a dry socket, I think they call it, where, kind of the blood clot gets removed. And it says, well, you should be fine as long as it's not a lower wisdom tooth. And I'm thinking, right, chance have just gone up by about 20% now. It says it should be fine as long as it's not impacted. Okay, right, they've just gone up to about 40% now. But, it doesn't happen to most people unless you're in your 30s or 40s. And then I think, oh, right, great. Yep. So yes, it's been an eventful week. And
so by the time this goes out, is this being done from beyond the grave? Really?
You know what? I think I'm through the worst of it now. The fact that I've actually survived it, given the fact that before I'd even been put out, I managed to faint.
Oh, we really shouldn't laugh at that.
Well, whatever it takes, really. I mean, I dare say you don't remember very much of it, so.
Well, the annoying thing was they said, right, you'll go to sleep and then you'll wake up and it'll be done. And the fact that I'd fainted, I kind of must have woken up about 30 seconds later thinking, well, that was quick. That's brilliant.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than coming out stuff like that, because it's like being Ed on a Sunday night after he's had a few beers, and then you start wondering, what have I been saying?
Well, yeah, you definitely feel like they've all been taking the piss out of me while I've been
absolutely.
out.
First thing is look in the mirror, see if they've drawn anything on your forehead.
I will say, when they put the pins in my ankle after I broke it, they didn't weigh me before doing the anaesthetic. So they must have gone, well, he's a fat bastard, give him X. And it essentially that was the
get out the horse tranquilizer.
Exactly, that was the nearest thing I've ever done to time travel, because when I came round initially after the surgery, and it was 6 minutes past 4 because there was a big clock in front of me. I closed my eyes and opened them again, and it was 20 to 7. I mean, I managed to come to once very briefly, and then essentially that's it. I lost another sort of best part of 3 hours instantly.
So you took the drops from the end of Evil Dead 2, did you?
It would appear so, yeah. And all I got for it was some lousy metal in my ankle. So yeah, shit.
So anyway, it's nice to see you're on the mend, Mark, and you finally got that tooth out. So anything else going on with your life, heart making or anything like that, or is it back burner at the minute?
No, that's back burner at the moment. Krav Maga's still going on.
Still groin fixated?
Yes, very much groin fixated. Managed to get to a football match the other day. Took the wrong train back and ended up about 40 miles away. At 12:30, and no buses, so I had to eat up an £80 taxi.
Ouch.
Is that what you decided on, as opposed to sleeping on a bench and dying of exposure?
Yeah. It is that kind of horrible thing where you go, I'm not paying 80 quid for a taxi, and then you just think, but I can't sleep here. So.
Were you playing or watching a match?
Oh no, just watching.
So was alcohol involved?
I'd had a couple of halves, but okay. I swear it was
normally
the train
a football game.
Fault. It was. I'm sure it was the station's fault.
I just, you see, when I do that, and I use the word when because I've done it both more than once and expect that I'm going to do it again at some point in my life. Don't you also just briefly check how much it costs to stay the night where you are? Because the last time I did it, I went to Birmingham and I checked how much it would cost. The taxi was about £100. And the staying overnight was £74, including breakfast. So I just stayed overnight.
Well, there you go.
And you get to take the train. Generally speaking, if you come to the ticket office the following morning and you look properly dishevelled and sad, and you say, "I overslept. Can I come back?" They generally let you for free. That's a top tip for the podcast.
Wow.
In case
there you go.
But yeah, I've done Rugby, Birmingham, and Stoke-on-Trent.
Head on tour
the country. Yeah, get all the train stations like a Monopoly set.
With Rugby and Birmingham, they were alcohol induced. Stoke-on-Trent was like Mark. I simply misread the platform boards, so I was stone cold sober and immensely frustrated as I hurtled through Milton Keynes Station.
I really do look forward to you writing a down and out guide of English train stations.
I'll tell you what, the Stoke-on-Trent hotel, the taxi back from Stoke-on-Trent, I did ask, it would have been near £200. £46, I stayed at the glamorous Plough Motel. No breakfast with that one, but never mind.
I think you could do a blog, like the best places to miss your train and
wake up.
end up at. And then you could do, I stayed at this place and it really wasn't very good, or I stayed here. I was
not sexually assaulted at this station.
I've never experienced this. I've never, whether it's the fact that I don't drink very much, or whether it's just I just haven't got around to it in my life.
Do bear in mind,
Kaz, you're making the assumption that it's the beer's fault here.
I used to commute every single day. It was more after on a Friday night. You'd visit the pub because we were a hi-fi company. That's what we did. And yeah, that was what the driving force. I mean, I don't get the train often enough now. I mean, the only other time I suppose I sort of lucked in was on one occasion whilst I was studying at university. I got on the train, the district line at Temple to go to Mile End. And I fell asleep on the tube. And when I woke up, I was 2 stations away from Mile End, but I'd been all the way to Upminster in Essex and was coming back.
Good going.
Which was quite fortunate, really.
Yeah, at least you didn't miss your stop, technically. So
no, I didn't. No, I was
going to say pounds per minute. That's technically rent you're paying at that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have nearly herniated myself this afternoon extracting a Danish valve amp from a box which was so large that it won't fit even with half of the rear seat of the ST down, it wouldn't fit in that aperture. So it had to sit on the passenger seat, and then it hit all the buttons on the stereo, so you couldn't use that. And changing gears, it had to be done with a certain degree of trepidation. Once again, I've been reminded that I haven't chosen the most practical car for the business of moving around hi-fi review product. But that's by the by.
You say that, but you should try the Mustang when you've got a McFlurry in the drinks holder, and changing gear. That's an art. I've got that down to a T now.
I don't believe you because every single McDonald's McFlurry machine is broken. Every single one of them. You wander into a McDonald's, and it doesn't matter what station you've woken up in, and you go to the McDonald's. The McFlurry machine is always broken.
The ice cream machine is always broken.
It is a conspiracy. Yeah. If you know of a working McFlurry machine, do send photos. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't particularly like them, but Will, my son, is an enormous fan. So, but it's brilliant because I'm not the one that's the bearer of ill tidings. He goes, "Can I have a McFlurry?" And they just go, "No, the machine's broken." And just it's like, well, not from my mouth, son. There you go. So yes, that's in and running. An enormous valve amplifier. It's extremely good, although it probably ought to be because it's £6,500. Other than that, I went to the newly refurbished Museum of Army Flying. Or no, they've renamed it. It's now the Army Flying Museum in the splendidly named village of Middle Wallop in Hampshire.
Right.
And that was really good. They've put considering that, like a number of museums in this country, it's run on a pretty tight budget. I think they've done a really impressive job. So if you are looking for a fun day out in the Hampshire-Wiltshire region, I'd strongly advocate paying it a visit. That was all very good. And it's been another day at Santa Pod. So all manner of silliness has been making its way.
Car day today.
Making its way back down the A509, including a car which I've messaged you in the past about, Phil, which is someone has a GT500 which they've removed. As I understand it, they've removed the supercharger and decided to move to 2 turbochargers instead because it's simply what 600 and whatever wasn't enough.
Yeah,
so,
there are silly people like that. That do
so
things
that was making its way back down the A509 as I was coming up. It's very easy to spot because essentially they're like 2 power stations sticking out of the bottom. It's not the most subtle install I've ever seen, but it is extremely quick.
Yeah. So
in a straight line anyway. But no, it's been a pleasant enough. A pleasant enough week.
I've had I was going to say a quiet week. It's not been a quiet week. It's been a really, really busy week, but boring because I've been doing lots of reviewing and so on. We've got a first TV in, so we've got a TV for review now. Yay. Got another one coming this week. Got projectors to watch. So I've actually been catching up with quite a few things that I needed to watch because I had to review a projector. So I watched all the episodes I hadn't seen so far of Discovery, which was probably episode 3 to episode 6 or 7. So really enjoying that because it's in scope and it looked fantastic. And then today was a bit of a Mustang day, so we went for breakfast to...
Is this the diner that you had the argument about?
No. That was on Tuesday. So we did that on Tuesday, but it pissed in the rain. There was only about 5 or 6 cars turned up. The hardcore that turned up basically to that one. And it was
did
okay.
other ones attend to turn up, but actually just wrapped it around a lamppost somewhere?
No, the old boys with the classics just won't bring them out. If there's any sign of rain, they just won't bring them up. And I don't blame them because they're absolutely pristine. The 60s stuff that they've got.
And lethal.
Yeah, they can be.
Let's not forget lethal.
So today was a breakfast meet at Toby Carvery. So all you can eat breakfast, and we all turned up, and then we all went for a cruise up through the Tyne Tunnel up to Bedlington of all places.
I've never been to Bedlington. I've seen signs to it.
I've never been either. So today was the first day I've ever been there. Nice
Are you going to go
cafe.
back?
The cafe was okay. The car meet was that. So and they did a very nice millionaire biscuit. So I might be back for that. But yeah, it's been a bit of a Mustang day, and then I had a nice drive down the coast. So through Blythe, Whitley Bay, down to Tynemouth, and then back home. So yeah, it's been a good day for stretching the legs on the car. I've thoroughly enjoyed that.
Total petrol expenditure £1,800.
I'll tell you what I've done. The last couple of fill-ups I've been filling. Normally I'll just run it on 95 RON fuel. Last few fill-ups have been 99 octane, and my God, it started making all sorts of pops and bangs and crackles and all sorts on the overrun as you go down the gear. But it sounds fantastic. And today the windows open, sound off the buildings and all the rest of it. That's why I've got a Mustang. It just puts this huge smile on your face. It's fantastic.
Not the people who have been woken up by the pops and bangs, but them. So
time for competitions. Mark, why don't you do them this week?
Okie dokes. You can win a copy of The Girl in the Spider's Web on Blu-ray, and you've got until the 11th of April for that one. We've also got a copy of The White Reindeer on Blu-ray, and that one closes on 18th of April. And finally, a copy of The Bouncer on Blu-ray again, and that one closes on 21st of April. And as ever, all competitions are open to eligible AVForums members resident in the UK, except Phil.
And any previous competition winners?
Yes, indeed. Richard 8500 won a copy of Submergence on Blu-ray. Robot Hamster won a copy of 88 Films Cannibal Bundle on Blu-ray. And Wildcard won a copy of Wheels on Meals on Blu-ray.
Excellent. So well done to our competition winners there. And before we go to hardware news, just a quick sponsor message for this podcast. The Beer 52 deal is back. Now, people who listen to this podcast on a regular basis may remember the beer52.com/AVForums deal, which was basically crate of 8 craft beers, Ferment magazine, and a snack, which was delivered next day shipping. And you get that case for free. All you need to do is pay $5.95 postage. and then you get your access to these beers and the magazine and so on. And if you like the service, if you like the beers, then it's £24 a month on a subscription basis, where you get more craft beers every month, different magazine, different snack, that kind of thing. So it's a bit of a craft beer club. And there's no minimum commitment on this. You can take the free case, try the beers, and see what you think. And if it's not for you, you can cancel it. And you don't have to pay anything else other than the postage. They do 2 slightly different cases. So if you like the darker beers, then you get yourself the mixed case. If you're more of a lighter beer kind of guy, then you go for the light case. And it's pretty easy to follow. So if you go to beer52.com/AVForums and sign up for the exclusive deal for AVForums members, you can have your 8 craft beers, your magazine, your snack. If you like it, then you can stay on and get the subscription. I think quite a few people did the last time this deal was made available to AVForums members. If you like your craft beers, I know Ed is quite partial to craft beers, and I know Ed's just partial to beer, but he quite likes his craft beers as well. So that's beer52.com/AVForums, and that concludes the sponsor message. But if you fancy that, then it is quite a nice little deal that is exclusive for AVForums members. Right, next, hardware news. Okay, so hardware news. No real reviews because, well, Ed might review something. Are you going to review something, Ed, in the hardware news?
I suppose so. I mean, I've got some things. There's some things I've uploaded so they're in the tank.
Right, so we'll come to that in a second because there's some TV stuff that we need to do first of all. One of them that I checked out yesterday, because it was the FA Cup semi-final yesterday. So the BBC are streaming the FA Cup matches. Well, that one yesterday, which is a bit late for you podcast listeners now, but they're going to do the FA Cup final on the 18th of May in 4K HDR, so HLG HDR. They did it for some of the World Cup games last year, and they also did it for the last David Attenborough series. I'm trying to remember what it was called now. Is it Dynasties. And it was spectacular, and I've got to say, the football did look really good yesterday. I did watch the game. It was a crap game.
Yeah, they chose the wrong semi-final.
They did really, yeah. But in terms of the HDR, the HLG HDR performance and resolution and so on, it did look really nice. There were a few issues. Compression, I thought the compression reared its head now and again and became quite obvious. Now I am watching it, or I did watch it, on a 65-inch Samsung Q9ER, which is their new TV. It's in for review at the minute. So 65 inches, I'm not used to watching 65 inches. I normally have a 55-incher here, so I did notice it a bit more in terms of compression. I'm sitting quite close to the screen, to be fair. I'm only 7 feet back from the screen, so I'm sitting quite close.
So the nature of kind of trying to photograph that kind of grass pitch and that kind of thing in 4K tends to lend itself to showing that, I think.
It does. And it was good from a review point of view, because I did catch a few things that the TV was doing as well. So obviously full array backlight and all the rest of it. So I'll go into that when I review the TV. But there was a dirty screen effect there. When the camera was panning over the pitch and the pitch was taking up most of the picture, you could see that. And there was a few other issues. But in terms of the actual source material, they have to compress it. There's no way that they can do it without compression. It's just it was a little bit too noticeable for me, for my liking. I thought maybe they could have turned it up a little bit more. But anyway, it looked good. The final is the 18th of May. This was on a first come first served basis. Thankfully, I got in there before kick-off and managed to get a stream. I'm assuming that you watched it as well, Mark.
You know what? I'm afraid I didn't. I thought it was going to be an absolutely awful match.
You were right.
So I didn't bother. But you know, they said that with the World Cup it was going to be first come first serve, and I've got to say I don't think I ever tuned into a match where I wasn't able to watch it.
Yeah, I did check the stream strength as well, and obviously my internet connection is 76 meg, so it wasn't an issue with the stream either. It was compression from their end, but everything else looked fantastic, and the HLG, it just gives it that lifelike look, which is what you want from something like that, and it gives it just a bit more realism to the image. You know, it's not like mega bright and all the rest of it. It just makes it feel a bit more natural, a bit more like you're actually watching the game from the stand. So yeah, it's really impressive. And if you have a 4K TV, if you want to find out if you have a compatible device as well, if you go to the iPlayer help pages online, they have a huge list of every device that's able to pick up these things as well. So if you're not sure about your TV or your streaming device or whatever, you can go on there. So that was interesting. And like I say, the final coming up. The other bit of TV news to discuss is LG's pricing for their 2019 OLED TVs was released. So we'll go through this quickly. The W9, which is the wallpaper TV, it's available in two sizes, 65 and 77. 65-inch is £1 under £7,000. The 77-inch is £1 under £13,000.
A penny under both,
sorry,
in fact.
Sorry, you're right, Ed. I read that wrong. So they're a penny under.
Right. Cancel that order.
They're available 6th of May. Obviously, that is the flagship wallpaper TV that comes with a separate soundbar and all the electronics and everything in the soundbar and so on. So that is their premium signature product. That is why they're priced that way. So moving down to more sensible levels, the AVForums members will be interested in. So the E9 TV, so the G has gone now. There's no G series. So E9 is the next TV down, 65 and 55 inch. 55 inch is £3,000 and the 65 inch is £4,000 minus a penny. They're available end of April, so 29th of April. And then I think the TV that everybody's going to be interested in, there are two different versions. They have suffixes that are slightly different. PLA is widely available, and I think MLB, if it has that at the end, it has a different stand, and it's I think it's a retailer exclusive TV, although LG have not come back and confirmed that yet. I did ask them last week and I haven't had an email confirming that, but that's, I am assuming that is why the difference is there. So the PLA sets, the C9, 77 inch, 65 and 55 inch, they are all available 22nd of April. 55 inch is £2,500, the 65 is 3,300, and the 77 inch is 7,500, and again a penny under for all them. And then 3rd of June for the MLB sets, 65 and 55 C9s, and again same price, 65 is 3,300, 55 inch is £2,500. So I think that is going to be the sweet spot. It was last year. The C8 was the one in the lineup that most people gravitated towards in terms of features and pricing and design and all the rest of it. The only real difference between the C9 and the E9 is that the E9 is the on glass design, and it has the floating stand, so it looks like the TV's floating in midair because it's got the glass stand. And the C9 has a more sculpted, I'm trying to remember the name of the stand they call it now, but it's more of a sculpted stand that helps with the sound quality. That's the PLA, and then I'm assuming that the MLB will be the moon crescent like stand. So that's
which
the
I rather
C9.
like, I'll be honest. I think it's quite an attractive piece of design.
Yeah, I got a B9 through with that stand because it was the stand on the B7. And
yeah, it's the same one I've got. Yeah,
and it's quite a nice stand, that one. And then finally, mentioning the B7 and the B8, the B9 is the TV this year. Alpha 7 processor, although it's a Gen 2 Alpha 7 processor, so it has a few different bits and pieces. We'll cover those when they come in for review. 55 and 65 for the B9. And the 55 is £2,000 and the 65 is £3,000, and they're available 1st of July, so a little bit later for
now. Can I be
sets.
cynical here? Is that presumably because they will sell quite a lot of those, and if you're in, for whatever reason, some form of artificial hurry to buy an OLED, they'd rather you spent a bit more money on the spendier ones?
My advice to anybody is do not buy a TV at the minute. These are all, have all been, I mean, manufacturers won't like us saying that, but don't buy a TV at the minute because you will pay full whack at the minute for the TVs, and there will be price drops. Now the B9 has a different processor, so there is a performance level difference there, mainly in colour reproduction and a bit of processing, a bit of upscaling stuff. I'm not sure if it has smooth gradation this year. They have moved smooth gradation out in the menu, so it has now has its own menu thing where it was under noise reduction last year. There's a few other changes. But yeah, there is a step up difference between the B9 and the C9, like there was with the B8 and the C8 last year. If you want a bargain TV and you're not that fussed about basically colour reproduction and so on, if you just want an OLED TV that and I'm saying that, but they're still deadly accurate TVs and they look great. The B9's a great buy, absolutely, but I wouldn't buy it at the minute.
No. Now, I suppose I'm going to have to try and ask questions that Steve would probably do, and he'd do it sober and know what he was talking about. Obviously, we've got this enormo Panasonic that was announced. The model name escapes me because
the GZ 2000.
Do we have any inkling at all what the whopping version of that is going to cost next to the 77C9, for example?
No, because they don't do a 77-inch version of the Panasonic.
I could have sworn I actually spent nearly 70 seconds before this podcast started. There was ambiguity about whether a super big version existed, but apparently if that's not the case,
hasn't been announced. So
right.
If it does exist, it hasn't been announced yet officially from Panasonic. Panasonic are only doing 55 and 65 in the new lineup of OLEDs. The 77 is still the model from last year. So
right,
that's carrying over.
In other words, it has to compare to a 65E9. I mean, do we have any feedback on what the price disparity of having a product that supports both flavours of HDR is going to cost you?
We haven't really got any confirmed, because I am hearing on the grapevine, although Panasonic haven't confirmed it yet, that their TVs are going to be really late this year, and we're looking at possibly August or September for the Panasonics. So we've got some tentative pricing on that in terms of, but it's, the E9 is going to be available in 2 weeks time. The Panasonic's not going to be around till later in the year by the looks of it, what I'm hearing on the grapevine. I need to ask that question of Panasonic. We'll do that this week, but that's what I was told on Friday, that the Panasonics are going to be late, and if that's the case, it gives the E9 quite a bit of a head start market wise on that one.
There's no point, you tend to notice there's no point rushing in a year when you don't have like some kind of major international sports tournament or something like that.
This is true.
I mean, the problem for LG is that this year is that they're not the TV with everything on it, which was always the selling point for the LG last year, was the fact that if you got the LG, it had everything on it apart from HDR10 Plus, which they were never going to add. And their argument was that their dynamic tone mapping is the same type of algorithm that HDR10 Plus uses, so why do you need HDR10 Plus? They're continuing this year with that argument, but that argument is weakened quite significantly by the fact that Philips and Panasonic ranges of TVs this year, and certainly the OLEDs, are going to have HDR10 Plus and Dolby Vision, and that's going to eat into their sales, absolutely, because people are box tickers at the end of the day.
It's a completionist thing. It's more than it's the simple peace of mind of just, it's like, oh, what happens if it suddenly becomes the de facto? And this is not an inconsequential sum of money we're talking about. It just encourages people to seek out the one that has all of the bits. Same way you look at a washing machine and go, which one spins the fastest?
Yeah, so it is a little bit strange, because you would think if LG was to add HDR10 Plus, they then have the full gamut, they have everything on there, and they continue with being the TV that would get the recommendations because it has the best UI interface with WebOS. It has all the HDR formats, including a Technicolor format for professional use and that kind of thing, and those that want real accuracy. It's creating a little bit of a problem. But then again, you look at Samsung, and Samsung are not going to go Dolby Vision at this moment in time. And I say at this moment in time because I do understand that they are internally discussing the fact. But I wouldn't imagine that that's suddenly going to appear on Samsung TVs. But Samsung don't do Dolby Vision, they do HDR10 Plus. LG do Dolby Vision and don't do HDR10 Plus, whereas Philips and Panasonic at this moment in time do both.
Well, there you go. But so, do we know what Sony's up to? I mean, are they doing one or t'other?
Sony do their own thing. Sony do Dolby Vision on their sets. They don't do HDR10 Plus. They had a misleading slide at CES which intimated that the XG95 might do HDR10 Plus, but it was actually, their wording was compatible with, which meant it didn't actually do HDR10 Plus. What it meant was that it would play the HDR10 layer, which all TVs do. Which
they do anyway, yeah.
So it was a little bit strange. Plus, they're IMAX enhanced, and my understanding of IMAX enhanced specification was that the TV had to do HDR10 Plus, and obviously Sony TVs don't, but yet they're IMAX enhanced. So, yeah.
I do love transparency. It makes life just so much easier, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? But I've got to say, one of the neat little features that Samsung have put on their TV, which I was really happy to see this time, is it actually tells you that you're watching HDR10 plus, which none of the TVs last year told you what you were watching. So so you had to try and guess whether it was reading the correct metadata and displaying it the way. So it actually says that now when you go to in the settings or whatever, and it will say HDR10 plus if it's getting that. So I watched the Grand Tour in HDR10 plus on Friday afternoon.
Is it just me, or has there been a kind of like this kind of dialing back of? You always used to have an info button on your controller which automatically showed you exactly what you're watching, and you know. And that seems to have almost like been hidden away by manufacturers now. It's, you know, sometimes you have to root around to find. Some
manufacturers, whereas LG, as you'll know, because you've got a B8 mark, as soon as it receives a signal, it tells you what type of signal it's receiving. And it'll flash it up and it'll tell you if it's Dolby Vision or if it's HDR10 or if it's HLG. It'll tell you what that is. But they were one of the only companies doing that. Panasonic, you had to press the info button on the player a couple of times for it to see what it was actually outputting and so on. So, but the companies have been getting the feedback, and I have noticed this time around this year that it will flash up what it is that you are watching on the TVs. So that's a positive this time. There's so many flavours, you need to know whether you're watching the base layer or if it's actually doing the dynamic metadata, so it just makes sense to do that. So anyway, that's the LG announcement or their pricing for their OLED TVs. We're hoping to get them in for review very soon. Like I said, we've got the first TV in for review, which is the Samsung Q90R. Set that up last Thursday, so I have been watching some normal TV viewing and so on that. I've yet to do any measurements and any real sort of tests. I did run the Spears and Munsell PET test patterns through it as well. Has some interesting results there, which will make for some interesting reading and some interesting viewing in the review when I get to that. And this week I'm hoping to get the Sony XG95 55-inch. I don't think anybody's looked at a 55-inch yet, so we'll have the 55-inch, and I'll be able to put that up against the 55-inch Q9 FN, which I will be doing with the Q90 as well. So that's Samsung's flagship from last year, as well as a 55-inch C8 OLED and a 55-inch 903 from Philips. So I've got all those to do comparisons with, and those are the two reviews coming up soon TV wise. Right, so I think I've done all the TV stuff, so let's move over to Ed. So what are you going to review for me?
Right, we're putting stuff together. There's a pair of headphones which you have been contacted by the lady in question. They are apparently learning. They seem to have some sort of form of artificial intelligence and will adapt their sound to your preferences and your habits. And that terrifies me, but you know, you've asked me to review them, so I'll give it a go.
It's something that I think, just the way you've described it, I want to know more, because I had that
a demo from intriguing.
Yeah, I had a demo from Sony with a very similar concept, and it sounded spectacular. And it sounds like this is very much along those lines. That
a productionized version of that.
Yeah. But
if I was to tell you, I think I might have something even more interesting lined up. I've got an integrated amplifier turning up now. The bad news is it's over £6,000. So sorry, it's not a mainstream product, but I think it is a glimpse of things to come, because it has analog inputs and a phono stage, so you can connect a record player. All laughing, all good. It then has digital inputs, so you can connect digital sources to it. All good. It's got network capability. All good. So essentially it becomes both amplifier and the better part of your source equipment. So far, so normal. It then also has an EQ function to start playing about with how it responds and interacts with your speakers and your room to iron out idiosyncrasies in that performance. I don't know that much about it at the moment. The brand I do know about, but I was unaware of the existence of this amplifier until earlier in the week. But I was contacted by the people, and the moment that they said, oh, yes, it starts to correct what's going on, I thought, do you know what? I think the good burgers of AVForums might be interested in that. So it's ironic. I'll have side by side two £6,000 integrated amplifiers, one of which is full of valves and fundamentally would be entirely comfortable technology to people, watching the moon landing, and another one which is pretty space age by the standards of 2-channel hi-fi, and I would be able to actually make side by sides if the fancy took me. There will be a pair of Mission floor standers. Because I've decided, what the hell, this house isn't quite full enough of boxes already, so let's try some really big boxes. So there will be some QX floor standards from Mission, and finally, I believe it's going to come. This is a slightly awkward one when it comes down to dealing with the availability of stock. I would like to be looking at another pair of fine audio loudspeakers, but it is looking increasingly likely they aren't going to make it here before May. So that being the case, there are some various candidates from the Blue Sound range. I was blown away by the Node 2i. I thought it was the best affordable streamer that you can buy at the moment, bar none. So I wanted to take a look at what happens when they start doing all-in-ones and things like that. So the most likely outcome, unfortunately for timing, is that it will be a Blue Sound rather than the fine audio product, because the fine audio product is fascinating in its own right. And then in terms of stuff which is already uploaded and good to look at, as I said, we've got Name's new standalone streamer. We've got some music playback software from Rune. I've done a pretty in-depth review of that by all accounts. Some KEF LSX active speakers, and I did say last week, and I stand by it, it's a product which is excuse me, simultaneously delighted and frustrated me in equal measure, and you can read the review and find out why. And then also a dinky little integrated amplifier from another Danish company called Tangent, but theirs doesn't cost £6,500, it costs 180 quid, and it's one of the most surprising things I've reviewed in quite a long time.
Okay, that all sounds interesting.
Say it like you mean it.
No, the headphones do sound genuinely interesting.
They do, yeah, absolutely. Which is why I've asked Ed to review them. Yeah,
more than once. In fact, I've just been administrationally incompetent. So yeah, we're sorting it out now.
Yeah, but yeah, sounds really interesting. Right, Record Store Day is still a thing, Ed. I always saw that as a bit of a hipster event type thing. I didn't really see it as pushing vinyl for any other sake other than sales, basically. And the exclusives. Hold on a second.
It is. There's no. The advantages of listening to vinyl are so. My advice when people say, "Oh, I'm thinking about this. What should I do?" Unless you are willing to lavish time, effort, and general neuroses on it, just don't.
Well, the point I was trying to come to, Ed, is it still a valuable thing, Record Store Day?
It still brings out. It still seems to be used as an opportunity to bring out certain unusual releases that wouldn't necessarily have seen the light of day under any other condition. Now, you can question how valued these releases are to you. I mean, for example, the standout, ultra desirable release of last year's Record Store Day was the Barbie Girl single by Aqua. And I don't recall that being a hi-fi masterpiece. It's been a while since I've listened to it.
Are you telling me that you don't think there was a huge market for the Shogun Assassin soundtrack on red vinyl?
Well, no, on the contrary, every single one of them sold, and they command a premium on Discogs. But if you look at how much a Record Store Day release of Aqua's Barbie Girl will cost you, I'm afraid it has to play very much second fiddle. So, I mean, what it does do is it brings people into physical stores, and even if 20% of them come back again for another purchase in the year, that's got to be an advantage for the physical premises. These are tough times, and that does help.
Now, is it open to abuse? Because what you're saying here is that sometimes they're limited editions. So people are going to go in there, they're going to get them, and then straight on eBay with them. Yeah.
Yes, no question. However, effectively, Record Store Day has evolved to try and handle this. There are very few exclusives which are in so limited a demand that you will be automatically at war with the scalpers. And if you genuinely want to release something special on Record Store Day, it would appear that there are channels to market that you can use, so your records go into the clutch of Record Store Day records, but they're not announced. Boards of Canada, one of the groups I'm a huge fan of. They, on 2 different record store days, have not told anyone they're releasing anything, and stuff has simply turned up as unannounced promos, and they're expensive. But given that the scalping fraternity didn't know they were going to turn up, your chances of finding one are as good as anyone else. So there are any number of criticisms. It messes about with the pressing schedule for normal release albums. It does encourage, all too often it's just like, oh, it's another release of X or Y, and we've already got perfectly valid examples of it. But there is enough decent stuff breaking cover to normally make it worth the effort. And just as importantly, as I say, it does give a decent shot in the arm for physical record stores. So business is tough. There's no getting around that, and it does help them. And I would like to say, in terms of, I need to be careful so this is not done as a plug, but over the last 4 record store days, Riga, the turntable and hi-fi manufacturer, has been the official hardware company of Record Store Day, and they've always taken the opportunity to produce a special Record Store Day version of one of their affordable turntables, and the price premium they charge for it is square to none. Essentially, it covers the cost of making it look a little bit different. And what they do, which I think is incredibly cool, is that they always get artists who are involved in that record store day, and they'll come to the factory and they'll sign plinths at random, and you have no idea if you've bought one with a signed plinth until you open it after you've bought it, which I always think is quite a cool thing. So you can end up with a turntable. I mean, the one that was pretty cool last year was Tim Burgess of the Charlatans, who, as I understand it, is not particularly big on signing anything, signed a couple of plinths. So if you happen to have one of those kicking around, that all your affordable starter turntable becomes a very desirable object indeed.
Okay, good stuff. So that's Record Store Day. Is it this weekend coming?
Yeah. I believe so.
Yeah. So if you want to know what it's all about, I guess it's any record store that you can go into, Ed. There's
a list on the Record Store Day website. They have to be independent, but it's an excellent spread across the UK. I mean, you have to go some to be in an absolute desert of places that aren't participating. I mean, I'm afraid this does mean if you're Highlands and Islands of Scotland, as you might imagine, your options are a bit more limited. And I think East Anglia, unless you're prepared to go to the city, it might be a challenge. But otherwise, it's a good spread of stores paying attention and participating. And I haven't actually looked at the list this year because I'm busy trying to squirrel what fragile resources I have for things like buying a house. But there will be some good things on there if that blows your frock up.
Okay. Before we end, you've done your playlist on Spotify.
I did.
I've got to say, I've had it on rotation, and it's really good listening.
Well, thank you.
But then I normally like the stuff you like.
Yeah, I'd be interested in feedback from other human beings. Feedback is welcome. Essentially, what I thought was important, I thought it's single tracks from albums that have done business over March. Not every single one of them were released in March. Some of them are a little bit older than that. I don't really want to get into doing very, very long playlists. I'd rather you used it as a jumping off point to listen to the album from which the track comes. And if you really like it, you can then deep dive the artist and so on and so forth. We've done it in Spotify because, as I understand it, that's the most likely one that you're already subscribed to. If you aren't subscribed to it, you can still access it on the free version. And because of that, if you have subscribed to another streaming service, you can use the Soundies link, which I put into the post on the last podcast feed, and you can convert it into whatever streaming service you are using. And I have no doubt in my mind that there are 10 tracks on it, and I'm sure at least one of them won't translate into various versions of the streaming services. I think the Ibibio Sound System album appears to be a Spotify and Tidal exclusive at the moment, so my apologies if you are listening on a different service.
And where can people find the link for this?
That's in the last podcast thread, but I'll drop it into this one as well because I'm diligent.
And I'm sure you could obviously use the search facility in Spotify as well. That should be
I haven't tried, in fairness, but yeah, if you do a search for AVForums, it will probably...
AVForums. Oh, hell, that's brought a lot back. Yeah, it's there. AVForums Best of March 2019. There you go. In the playlist file.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say...
I'm thinking that's brought a lot of AVForums stuff back, but of course it's got access to my hard drive as well, and I've got a lot of things named AVForums in the music folder. So there you go.
Is that where you hide your porn?
No, the AVForums idents and stuff like that. Anyway, that's enough for the AV hardware side of things, and because Mark is on the podcast this week, we're going to do a little bit of gaming news, because there's been two now other big announcements, Mark, because I'm not big into as you know, I'm not big into the gaming side of things, but I do know that there's been attempts to have streaming game services in the past. We've covered them on the podcast in the past, and they've all tended to fall by the wayside, really, or not be as popular as we initially thought. Was it a case of they were before their time, and maybe that the fact that Google and Apple are getting involved now, it might be something that people are interested in?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you go back, On Live were kind of the first ones to really try this, and it seemed kind of space age technology way back in 2011. This idea that, you know, you would be playing your game from, you know, it would be server side, so everything is just being streamed to you, so therefore you don't have to have some, you know, expensive rig to be able to play the latest games. However, the problem was obviously latency rears its ugly head, and lack of killer titles, and ultimately the console market in particular has always been built around this idea of having exclusive games. So therefore it kind of it fizzled out before it began, but it was a really good idea. And Sony, when they bought up Gaikai, who were a streaming company, specialists in the field, so they could do the PlayStation Now service, they have similar ideas, which is everyone ultimately knows that the consoles days they're numbered. You know, the idea of having a specific box under your TV to do this kind of thing is something that will fairly soon be outdated, you know, putting in physical discs and everything. So in particular, Google Stadia idea, I think it's quite smart, the idea that you only have a controller. So therefore, you're not buying a box, it's purely a controller. They seem to be selling this on the idea that will cut down on latency, and it will, you know, just connect straight to your broadband. But as with most things, it's big on ideas, and there are lots of them and lots of great ones. However, we haven't heard anything about the business model. We haven't heard anything about, you know, the idea of exclusive games or pricing, and so that will be ultimately what makes or breaks it. But as far as just kind of proof of concept, it seems to have wowed a lot of people that it actually works, and it's got some really, really good ideas. This the concept that you can switch between devices, because Google are perhaps the best place to take advantage of this, more so than any other company, simply because the ubiquitous gateway of any TV that with Chromecast, PC with Chrome browser, any Android device, anything like that should be able to play these Stadia games. So that they showcased it with having, you know, someone playing on a big screen, and they turn, and then automatically a couple of seconds later they're playing on a tablet or they're playing on a phone attached to the controller, and it's supposed to automatically tailor the experience to the screen size and things like this, so the output changes. So many very, very good ideas, even down to the fact that they're obviously trying to integrate it with like YouTube, so you can be watching a video of whatever game it is, and there will be a try button, and then you can just jump straight into the action itself. The issue, though, as ever, is just, you know, what's the business model going to be like? Is it going to be, you know, kind of hugely expensive for people, in which case you won't get core gamers wanting to just give up their consoles and go over to it? And how do you break what's been a fairly traditional publishing model for, you know, the people who are financing these big games, they want to be able to sell them at, £60 for a certain amount of time, and then those who are impatient, who want something that they can download on the day and not have to go to a shop, are going to be paying a premium to be able to download it to a console with a hard drive. Where's the money for them? I'm not fully sure. It would seem on the surface of it to be almost the natural progression, because you've got Spotify for music, you've got Netflix for TV. But when you actually kind of dig a bit deeper, you realize that those are quite significantly different markets. Spotify has pretty much everything. You're not going to get a game service, even with all Google's money. Richer Than Croesus, they're not going to be able to buy up every single one of the latest games and put them out there for a nominal fee per month. So yeah, it's very exciting. However, I think there are so many questions more than answers at this stage.
They could Amazon it. I was thinking they could just Amazon it. So offer a streaming service like Amazon Prime Video, which you pay X amount per month, and they give you a selection of average games and occasionally an original, which is worth something. And then you can buy the premium games for full price, just like you can buy movies on Amazon. So unlike the Netflix model, where you're paying X amount and they give you hit and miss, and sometimes there are gems and sometimes they aren't, but it's all the same price, offer you the two-tone of being able to have something for free every month, and occasionally if you spot a game you really like, you pay the £60 and play that extra game.
But here's the question: do things ever leave that service? Because if you've got TV streaming services and something leaves, you've missed something. If you're 40 hours into a 60-hour game and that game goes, you are going to be absolutely livid. And if you want the latest game, unless the publishers sign up to say, right, well, we'll make those available as well, anyone who wants to play the latest game will say, well, the hurdle here is, well, I either pay, whatever it is, £10, £15 a month for Google service, and I don't get that, or I buy that dedicated box where I can get a disc and put it in and play it on the day. So
my question was going to be, obviously film fans are very much we still want physical media, we want something in the hand and so on, and there's been a few cases of services being dropped and people losing content, or the likelihood of people losing content. Our gamers are a little bit more advanced in terms of they don't really need the physical media, or are they just as the same as film fans?
I think it's very much kind of evolving. The figures for how much the big publishers are making from digital sales are just picking up pace continually. And so it's a little bit like with freeware and that kind of thing, freemium models. This idea that you've got the kind of the whale customer who's spending a huge amount. Lots of people still want discs. Lots of people are very much kind of dog in the manger there, and I'd put myself amongst them. However, there is an increasing proportion of gamers who do want just that simple ease at which they can have 10 games all on a hard drive, and they can switch between any of them, to the point where talk of there being a discless Xbox One coming out, simply for those people who prefer to play in that manner.
Yeah, that looks an interesting one. I use the word interesting. It just looks like a bold move, but isn't it supposed to be a proof of concept for the next Xbox? Was the scurrilous rumor? Well, yes. I mean, ultimately, everybody knows that this kind of model of a traditional box sitting under the TV that you stick a disc in will go at some point, and it's just kind of everyone's just trying to get their ducks in a row. But with regards to Google Stadia, I think the really cool thing is they say that it should work on a 30 meg broadband line, and they reckon they can deliver 4K 60 frames a second, doing that with plans to go up to 8K at 120 frames a second. Now, if they manage to do that, then you might have people say, well, that's the best possible way in which I could play a game. If they manage to solve that problem of latency, which they claim that they have done so, if as long as they get those, certain degree of killer titles on board, and timely, and in a timely fashion, because one of the issues with OnLive was that fact of, great, I'm playing a game, however, 6 months after it came out. So, there's no great hunger to do that, I don't think, in the gaming sector at the moment.
And what about what Apple are proposing to do?
I don't really care what Apple are doing.
Because I've got to say, I've never seen Apple as a big gaming company. It's never been.
I think that. No, they're very much. I think Apple are going to go similar. You know, Amazon was supposed to be joining in, and ultimately, the problem with both Apple and Amazon is unlike with Google, they don't have that kind of ubiquitous gateway, which is Google is on so many things, and once you figure out anything that can run Chrome is something that could be used for Stadia. You know, that is that's the ease of use. That's the idea of just as long as you have that controller in your hand, you essentially have that connection to, you know, a console that will give you that, you know, 4K 60 frames a second experience. With Apple and Amazon, they're still kind of tied to a slightly different model, I think, and I just can't see them making big inroads.
And when do we get Ready Player One levels of interactivity? That's what I want. I want my DeLorean.
You want your DeLorean.
Can we be clear about
holodeck.
this? It's going to lead to, if you do that, the actual disintegration of like the ability to people to just turn up and work and do things that we sort of take for granted is going to be quite significant. Because let's face it, these things offer escapism. If the principles are where it's actually just far more desirable to be in that than it is actual life, I think that there are some significant issues.
Some people would argue that's what's happening with social media already.
Yeah.
Yes, I know. They're going to make it a lot worse.
but that's where people start to plan, and people who work in studying things like productivity start to slowly insert the concept of gamification into work, and that'll be the next big thing. You know, like I don't know if you ever saw when Charlie Brooker did a program about, you know, the greatest games that have ever been created, and number one he put Twitter, and the example being that it is gamification. It is people desperately logging into something, almost interacting in a game-like manner to try and get those little likes and retweets. And it's you know, you're in a little Skinner box, and so therefore it's that experimental mindset that the next generation of people who design how you're going to work will insert that. You know, I don't want to scare you here, but you know, we are all heading towards the Matrix here.
Well, you know, if that's the case, at the very least, if we head to the Matrix, apparently I don't need to care. My job description becomes battery, and you know, I don't have to be too concerned about earning money and stuff. So long as I continue to be a battery, I'm fine.
Oh yeah, well, it's a funny thing. When you're young, you watch The Matrix, and you're ultimately you're on Neo's side. The older you get, the more you start to think, actually, I'd be Joe Pantoliano. Actually, you know?
Yeah,
I would just say, make me a millionaire. That's it. Take humanity. I don't really care.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Can you imagine being the alternative? They wouldn't actually need agents. They just need to tell a group of recalcitrant people that someone's trying to turn your life off, and it's like, no, sod that.
Yeah. This is life outside of the Matrix. Oh, this is a shithole, actually.
Maybe if the Wachowski was now the brother and sister, isn't it? If they're listening, maybe it's time for the final installment of this, where people go, actually, thanks, Keanu, but this is shit.
I thought they're both sisters now.
Let us back in.
I didn't. I can't keep up, Kaz. I was trying to be momentarily topical, and I've clearly failed.
I reckon I'd quite like one of the power suits. I reckon I could handle it if I had a power suit.
What, is this a Ready Player One thing?
Yeah. No. If I not being in the Matrix, being in the real world, but being in Zion.
No, come on, those things
with the power suits.
They were shite. They gave you the movement of an arthritic orangutan, and they had no crew protection at all.
No,
it's like humanity had forgotten every single lesson of armoured warfare ever written in 1,000 years.
A lot of bullets.
You could be in the Matrix and be in a better version of that.
Okay, how about?
But the big question is, do they have Brexit in the Matrix?
I think that's a glitch in this. To be honest, yeah. Actually, if they don't, can you sign me up to become a battery, please? I'm quite happy to take a step out of reality. But no, I try to look at this dragging this tortuously back. I just part of the problem is, for me, it's not solving an issue which is more a nature of modern computer gaming. And I'm going to sound like an old and reactionary person here because I am an old and reactionary person. That it's just, whilst I admire the tremendous achievement that a lot of modern games actually are in terms of how they've been constructed, I sort of lament the passing of stuff which is, I'll have a quick 20 minutes on X, delete as appropriate. These days, almost all marquee titles just seem to be something which require you to either have secured your income from other means or be 12. I just don't have. I don't have the time for it.
No, this is the other huge hurdle that they have, which is this idea that you can have, this gateway that you can go between multiple different devices and you can play in short little periods where you're on a TV, then you're on your phone, then you're on a whatever, ultimately is completely at odds with how modern console games are generally designed, which is they're more based around half an hour to an hour segments of game time at least. So this is where you've ended up with this kind of bifurcation of gaming. Why don't you get console quality games on phones when they have the processing power of old consoles in it? It's because the people playing on those devices are playing in an inherently different manner. The commute gamer is not the same as the person who's sitting back in their armchair. And so therefore having a device that goes between the two doesn't necessarily join up two different kind of lifestyles. No,
I mean, it's been years since I've done any. I mean, the nearest thing recent, I suppose, in remotely recent. I mean, I played. I suppose I must have got. Oh my word! About 20% into Grand Theft Auto 5, the actual story mode, and by the time you're in it that far, the actual planning and ability to do any of the of the more extended missions, that's not the work of a moment. It requires quite a substantive time investment and the ability to persuade a 5-year-old that you're doing something worthwhile and that he can't play. It doesn't.
But then maybe that's the kind of selling point. Someone of a certain age who's got to that point where they still want to game in that manner, but they have the responsibilities of other things, so therefore they would want that.
Let's not mince words. In other words, marketing a way of them being able to play it on the toilet.
Yes,
we can dance around this, but that's fundamentally what.
Well, this is what everybody said when the Switch was first shown. The amount of comments that immediately came up, like between underneath the YouTube, kind of big promotional material, was finally I can play Mario Kart on the toilet. And that's it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was my life. These days it's a little bit different, but I don't know. I think it could work. Ironically, it's not about if you like. Its success possibly is going to come more from adapting what counters the mobile phone games than it does the marquee console titles. Counterintuitive though that sounds, making the mobile phone games fractionally better is going to be more effective than the marquee title. The other thing is, just to reiterate something I've said so many times in the past, if they included the ability to play out of license Amiga games in a semi-simple way, I'd probably sign up. Because that's just a part of my childhood, and it goes back to what we were just saying. But Sensible Soccer and all of its spin-offs recognised this years ago that you could play quite a long match, or you could do 3 minutes aside, because that's often the length of time that two children had to actually get something done. And I don't know. Part of me is becoming old and nostalgic and yearns for that sort of thinking again.
Becoming.
No, I am.
Right, okay. So thanks for that, Mark. A little bit of gaming news there for you. Just because there's some interesting things happening in that world at the moment. We'll be back in a sec with some movie news and reviews. Right, okay, so movie reviews. We're already over time. I don't know how this happens, but I went to the cinema this week. I went to 3D IMAX. You know, my background in comic book movies, I'm not a big comic book fan. Don't really have a huge interest in superhero stuff, but the last few years I have been getting into it. I've been starting to follow things, and generally I've got a limitless card, so I have to use it. So I've been going along to various movies, but this one piqued my interest. I think the DC films have either been shockingly bad, really poorly put together, and just too adult and too dark and too moody and all the rest of it. And that hasn't really played well with audiences, I don't think. Certainly people that don't know a hell of a lot about the different Marvel and DC universes are kind of confused. I am. I never know if is this a DC or is this a Marvel or whatever. So I've had to learn that as I go along. But anyway, the point I'm getting to is DC have brought out this film. It's called Shazam. Now, there's some background here that I don't understand. Maybe Kaz can fill it in. With regards to Captain Marvel, this has something to do with that, and I don't understand what.
So Shazam's original name was Captain Marvel, but obviously they've decided it was a massive big controversy was who has the rights to use the term Captain Marvel. And so they obviously lost it, so they have to call him Shazam. But he was Captain Marvel, and he said Shazam to turn into Captain Marvel.
Right.
But they changed it to Shazam, who turns into Shazam. To be honest, I also think he's called Shazam. But he was once also called Captain Marvel. And the internet has decided to make that a big issue.
Okay. So anyway, this film, the one thing I will say is that the last film I did see at the cinema was Captain Marvel, funnily enough. A film set in the 90s. And the one overriding thing, a feeling I had coming out of Shazam was I felt like I'd been back in the 90s. Or certainly that I'd been back in my childhood in some way. And it's an odd feeling to try and put into words, but it just gave me that nice, warm, fun, action, comedy vibe. And I think they nailed it absolutely. For me anyway, they've absolutely nailed that feeling. They've nailed the fun aspect. It's really good fun. A lot of the jokes aren't really that funny, but the way in which they play out on screen are really, really interesting. I think the actors are absolutely superb.
I don't think any of the jokes in the Marvel films are actually particularly good jokes, but they just nail the atmosphere. That it just you know, you roll with it. Yeah,
that's kind of what I was trying to get across, Mark. Yeah, absolutely, it has that feel. Now, the actors, I'm trying to remember the name of the kid that plays the sidekick, the disabled kid, because he is absolutely brilliant. He absolutely nails his performance. He is really, really funny. He's just the right side of comedic and silly without it becoming annoying for an adult, if that makes sense. It could have gone too far the wrong way. I thought the way that they set up the characters, they gave them enough room to tell you enough a backstory of each character that you got their motivations. And I think each of the main characters within the movie has that. So they have that background there that you actually feel something for the characters.
Doesn't it also have Mark Strong in as well?
I was just coming on to Mark Strong. So the way that they set his story up, because the thing is your superhero is only as good as the villain. And sometimes that's where Superman falls down, I think, because, you know, somebody with those powers and all the rest of it, you know, he's almost invincible. So that's always been a weak spot. And I think they really nail Dr. Sivana is his name in this, Mark Strong's character. They get his backstory really nicely layered in terms of, you know, where this guy's coming from. You have some sympathy for him in terms of, you know, what happened to him in his past has set him on this course, and why he's so determined to follow through on that. There's a nice story there as well in terms of how he gets to be powerful, and the power is really, without any spoilers, not what he's expecting it to be. And then you've got this nice flip of the coin where you've got teenagers who are suddenly thrust into a really odd world. I mean, obviously this takes place in the universe where Superman and Batman and the Suicide Squad all exist. So it's that universe. And those characters exist within that universe. But it's set in Philadelphia. And for me, it was just really nicely paced. It had a nice backstory. The actors are all excellent in it, and you have to forgive me for not knowing who all the actors are off the top of my head. IMAX presentation, I've got to say, it's one of the best sound mixes I've heard in a long time. There's just the characters within it that allow the sound designers to add certain effects in and mix things in a certain way. Again, I don't want to spoil things, so but when you see the movie, you'll understand what it is I'm talking about there in terms of the sound mix. Absolutely brilliant. IMAX, there wasn't a lot of I don't think it was actually filmed with IMAX cameras, so there's not a lot of open matte IMAX ratio images. It was more cropped, but it's still really nice on the big screen. The 3D was excellent, and the one thing I would say is it's a 12A, and the thing is that there was a family sitting close to me, and I could see that they were squirming a little bit with their kids, and I would have put their kids about maybe 8 or 9 year old, and I think it's a bit strong. I don't know, because the thing is, at the end of the day, it's your kids, and you know what your kids are capable of watching or whatever. But I could see that they had maybe made a mistake, because there is strong language in it. There's not the F words are bleeped out, but there are strong words in it, and I've got to say the action's quite intense at points, and could be quite scary for younger kids. So just bear that in mind. I mean, obviously you know your kids, and you know what they will watch and what they won't watch, and what will scare them or whatever. But yeah, it's quite intense. There's quite intense action in there. There is violence in there, and there is some swearing, light swearing. So, but there's also a lot of humour. There's a lot of heart, and I felt like I was watching a film in the 90s. That's how it came across to me. It was just that vibe about it.
Good. Well, it sounds good. I can just say I watched Lethal Weapon on ITV4 last night for about the 8 millionth time. Just again, every now and again, a bit of nostalgia never does anyone any harm. So if it's tapping into that whilst not apparently being set in the past, that's quite cool.
No, this is the thing. It wasn't set in the past, but it's just the way that. Trying to explain this, it's just the way that the film feels, the way it comes across.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough.
So I fully agree with Kumari, who's done the review on the site. It's still on the homepage if you want to go and read her review. She scored it 8 out of 10. I will score it exactly the same, 8 out of 10. If you can see it in IMAX, although it's not got any huge IMAX set pieces, I've got to say the presentation was excellent. Sound mix is fantastic. The characters are brilliant. Actors are all really good. It's got a nice, fun feel about it. It's forgettable, but it has a nice fun vibe that you'll enjoy it. You'll come out of the cinema with a smile, having been entertained, and yeah, it's worth going to see.
Cool.
So so that was Shazam 3D IMAX. Kaz didn't get out of the cinema because Kaz is sat in front of his TV 24 hours a day.
Pretty much.
With matchsticks.
Apparently.
Hang on. Isn't it 25 hours? Oh no, it was 23. Yeah.
Using matchsticks to keep the eyes open. But you've been watching a lot of Netflix stuff, so just quickly to go through what you have been watching on Netflix and what is worthwhile there, and also any discs that you've seen in the last week that you would recommend. So
let me warn you off Unicorn Store first, because we were talking Captain Marvel. So here's my thinking. Brie Larson, she's an acclaimed actress. She's recently been super popular in Captain Marvel. She starred in it with Samuel Jackson, and one of the higher points of the film, I thought, was their chemistry. They were really good, kind of buddy chemistry. Well, they played well off each other. So when Netflix released this film, Unicorn Store, it doesn't naturally appeal to me, but the idea of a reteaming between Brie Larson and Samuel Jackson, it might get some mileage for some people, notwithstanding the title. But don't let it fool you. Okay, this was shot in 2016. It's one of those movies where the star has become so famous that they let her direct her own movie. A little bit like what happened when Seagal got so popular they let him direct On Deadly Ground.
But without it being, apparently, I've read your review, it doesn't seem to go out the other end. I mean, On Deadly Ground is in its own way it's one of those rare things where it's so bad it's sort of compellingly watchable.
Oh yeah, I love it. But it's just foolish getting a star to giving them that much power.
Yeah,
and they've gone and given Brie Larson the power to make this movie, and it's appalling. It's 20 years too late. Every male character in it comes across as distinctly misogynistic, but misogynistic in a really 90s way. I just couldn't imagine a boardroom of people, advertising executives, looking at how to promote a vacuum cleaner and deciding the best way was like a bikini-clad girl. It just seems very 90s. You could see it happening in the 90s. In 2019, it's not going to happen. It just seems ridiculous and too pointed. A bit of commentary for Larson to make, and it's a complete misfire. Samuel L. Jackson is odd in it. Larson's actually quite enjoyable herself, but her character's utterly vapid. I compared her in my review to the stoner characters that guys play in the 90s. You can have Keanu Reeves just sitting on a sofa acting completely wasted, and everyone complaining that he doesn't get a job. That's pretty much what Larson gets away with her character here, except we're supposed to feel sorry for her that she's not able to realize her artistic potential. I think it's an appallingly conceived movie, and I'm really furious that they've decided to commercially cash in on it, like 3 years later, release it just after Captain Marvel. Well, Captain Marvel's still in the cinemas, as if it's this re-teaming of Samuel Jackson and Brie Larson. Yeah, go check it out. Don't.
Okay.
All right.
There's nice bit of consumer advice there from.
We need to pay for some billboards.
Yeah, I watched it and I thought I'm not going to review this, and then I thought I've got to warn people about this. It's like a public service. I can't just tell them about the good stuff or the stuff that's average and not as good as expected. I got to tell people to avoid stuff as well. So it was like a public service on this one. On to the good stuff, and we're going increasingly, like, we'll get better and better as we go along. So the next one's probably Amazon's Hannah Season 1. Now, I loved Hannah, the movie. I thought it was a really quirky.
I did as well.
I did too. I love it.
Yeah,
soundtrack
really,
is amazing.
Yeah.
It is a phenomenal score and really well played by the two lead actors. And I thought it was perfect as it was. It was very good as it was. It didn't need all of this. The guy who wrote it has come back and pitched it clearly to Amazon. And I have no problem with them going back and kind of making the equivalent of a Bourne TV series. My only issue with this is that for people who've seen the movie, it is essentially an expanded version of the movie. So they throttle it out into 8 episodes, and there's a lot of filler. And if you've seen the movie, it doesn't get anywhere at any time. And the best thing about it is that there's a chance that it might go on places in the second season, because they've already announced another season. So there might be season 2 of Hannah where new stuff happens to her. But my difficulty with this is that I love the movie and I wanted maybe something different from Hannah. Get the movie storyline over and done within the first couple of episodes and then send her off on her own thing. They don't. They just tell the same story. And it's competent and well done. And I gave it a 6 out of 10. And they do have sparks of an interesting soundtrack, but it's not worth 8 episodes.
Do you know what I think they're also missing? I haven't watched it, but I'm willing to wager. Let's face it, once again, Tom Hollander just steals bits of that movie. If you told me that a man who has that he's not the most physical presence on screen, but can still convey that astonishing level of menace.
Yeah, he's really good in it, and his equivalent in this isn't.
Yeah, as I understand, I read the copy, but yeah, it's one of those things. But people seem to underestimate, especially if you're doing it after there's been a good version of it, that if you then start monkeying about with those characters and you don't have someone as magnetic on screen doing those things, it's just not going to fly. So we'll see. It's down the list of things. I would be determined to watch the second season of American Gods ahead of getting stuck into this. And Amazon comes out of my bandwidth, so I need to be prudent about these things.
Is there not a Game of Thrones coming as well? Ed?
Yes, there's that as well. I have to work out what the hell I'm going to do with that. Whether I go into hiding, but essentially, if I can do it, I'm working out if I could somehow go into hiding for 2 weeks, I could probably then do it all on 1 free month of Now TV. But that's just probably a shit.
I know a train station you could sleep at.
Yeah, I know. So we'll see. We'll see. I have to watch it. I've come this far. Can't not.
And
so.
I've now got to leave that bit in. I can't edit it out for the callback there, Mark. Thanks for that.
Sorry.
I'll have to edit something else out because we're way over time. Anything else streaming wise before we move on to the releases this week, Kaz?
Best of the bunch is Netflix's Highwayman. So I don't know whether any of you guys caught it, but it's Netflix, but it's Kevin Costner and Woody Harrelson, and it's the flip side to the Bonnie and Clyde story. And I really enjoyed it because tonally and in terms of setting, it's a very effective period piece, and it shifts the viewpoint from looking at Bonnie and Clyde as like these celebrated Robin Hood-esque bandits, which they were viewed like in that period, because it was a time of depression and a time when there wasn't enough money for anyone, to the viewpoint of the law enforcement after them, the dead bodies on the ground that they left, and these 2 veteran rangers who go after them. And Costner is fantastic. Harrelson is as well, and it's a nice gem for Netflix. So we'll go out on a high when it comes to streaming.
Okay, good stuff. Let's move on then. So films coming out this week or opening this week, Kaz?
Yeah, we got Wonder Park, which is an animation. I didn't really see this coming, and I haven't heard much about it, but it's getting a wide release. So I suppose they're looking to fill that gap before Endgame with films that might suit broad audiences and perhaps the family crowd at Easter. But the other one that, depending how you feel, people are anticipating or dreading is the Hellboy reboot.
Right, so I'm undecided on this one because I've saw the 2004 release.
Yes.
I didn't see the second film, and I don't know if I'm going to go and see this because I don't know where this is pitched at. Is this a continuation of the films you've had, or is it a reboot? So it's a complete reboot, is it?
I think because they'd probably want to call it a soft reboot because they need to cash in on audience love that's existing, and the fact that 10, 15 years later, there are going to be people who don't know who Hellboy is, so they've got to explain the whole damn thing again to them. Right. Now, Ron Perlman, I thought, was ace as Hellboy, and I enjoyed both of the movies. I don't really know whether we need a complete reboot. The trailers from this have got a lot of criticism. Yeah, there was
one before Shazam, and before that I was thinking I'm going to get a ticket, I'll go and see it. After seeing the trailer, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, it's difficult to tell. I mean, it's Neil Marshall, but he's a real hit and miss director. He's the guy who gave us like Dog Soldiers.
Yep.
But when it comes to doing bigger budget work, I don't know whether he's...
I was going to say Neil Marshall doing a kind of big budget and a rated 15. It just feels like you'll get a kind of a reined-in version of what he would have done.
Yeah,
it's gonna.
And I tend to find that people deploy Ian McShane these days to cover up problems, because we all fundamentally like Ian McShane. We go, oh look, it's Lovejoy.
I quite like Mila Jovovich as well.
Different reasons. Well, I'm assuming anyway.
Well.
But I don't know. I just thought. Yeah, I saw the trailer and I thought, yeah, it's just not been long enough since the last one for me to think, oh well, okay, let's give this another whirl. So
yeah, the only thing that might save it for me is that this week's looking like I'm not leaving the house, so I'm going to need an excuse to leave the house. So I might just go and see it rather than working all week. It could be the first film I've walked out on in a long time. I mean, the last film I walked out on was Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Or it could be that with really
you walked out of Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Yes, I did. I walked out.
Why?
Because
I like it.
I hated it.
You don't? Oh, I still employ certain lines from that film.
Right. Well, they'll go well over my head because I haven't seen it.
They stole my eyes, Master Robin. Or when she says that She changed her name. Her name's Latrine. Yeah, we changed it in 4th century from a shithouse. Stuff like that. I think that's good.
I didn't.
Touche.
Right, so that's what's coming out this week anyway, film-wise. Moving things on swiftly, disc releases. A lot of Blu-rays, not a lot of 4K.
No. So we've got Eureka's doing White Reindeer, which is up on the comps for grabs. Arrow are doing a couple of titles you'll have never heard of. Iguana with the Tongue of Fire. I think that's nothing to do with an iguana. And a Mellow. Van Damme's The Bouncer, actually a good film, is out as well. That's up for grabs on the comp page. The Rage Carry 2, 88 Films is releasing that, and Devil Hunter as well. Lizzie is getting a release, and A Bronx Tale, Robert De Niro, Chaz Palminteri. That was De Niro's directorial
I thought for
debut.
a moment it was that Fievel mouse cartoon. Okay, fine, that was me.
Fievel Goes West.
No,
because that's the second one.
It was De Niro's directorial debut from back in the 90s. It's actually quite thoughtful, nice little.
That's a very different film if you
different
sit your kids down in front of that.
No cartoon mice, though, is there?
No.
Disappointing.
Gangsters, though. And Aquaman, which is the one that's also getting a 4K release, which is the big hitter. There's also streaming. There's The Silence coming out, which is a Netflix original. That's coming out on Friday. Got twinges of A Quiet Place and Bird Box from it. I mean, not least from the title, but I think aliens, bugs, creatures, sci-fi something, can't speak any words. I mean, it appears to be the latest thing, so they're gonna cash in on that. We'll see what that's like on Friday.
Can someone confirm to me? Last night, or rather, very early this morning, Film 4 showed Sorcerer, and that hasn't been on for a while. And if you've not seen it, it's unbelievably good. Does anyone know if that's actually on all 4? Does the Film 4 stuff make it to all 4, or does it not?
I don't think any of the Film 4 stuff makes it to all 4.
That's a real shame.
But you should be able to find Sorcerer somewhere, surely on the streaming services. I mean, it's a phenomenal movie. It's old enough that it should pop up on Amazon or Netflix.
It doesn't seem to be on Netflix.
Who don't know what Sorcerer is?
It's
4 men drive 2 trucks.
No, do better than that.
No.
So there's an oil fire, and they've got to put it out. And it's Colombia, it's South American jungle, and they get a bunch of people who are prepared to possibly die because a lot of them have run out of money and they're living in South America because they don't want to get hunted down and killed by the mob or whatever. They've got reasons to be out there, and they have to drive trucks across the jungle to deliver very volatile,
incredibly unstable
nitroglycerin to
like
put out
Convoy,
the
then.
oil fire. Except with explosives. It's got one of the best practically staged stunts that I think I've ever seen, which is when they have to get across a bridge.
It's unbelievable.
And then they actually staged it, and you'd never get that these days. They actually drove this truck onto this wooden bridge that's running across a massive massive river in the middle of a hurricane. It is unbelievable to watch. People would die doing it these days, and I'm pretty sure Roy Scheider got concussion or something in it. Oh yeah, for what it's worth, Roy Scheider Jaws is in it, and he's aces. So
it's a fantastic film, and I was just, as I say, if you have never seen it, it's the thing is the way it's shot, the way it's done. It's perfect for the way it's done. It doesn't need anything more. I mean, I would dread a remake of any such thing now because it is just so atmospherically perfection. It, ironically, is in itself a remake or at least a homage to a much older film, The Wages of Fear. But that's more of an acquired taste. So,
yeah. I mean, this is the same premise. But it's just a lesser budget. But the same premise. It's a French black and white film where they have to drive the explosive and not, like every bump scares the hell out of them. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really well done. The guy directed Friedkin. He's the guy who did
Exorcist.
Exorcist, and he did French Connection. I mean, between him and Scheider, you should be sold on it.
Yeah, it's absolutely phenomenal. So I'm just ashamed that you can't just quickly grab it on a known location. But
Okay, well, on that bombshell, that wraps up the podcast this week. It'll probably be a lot shorter when you listen to it, dear listener, but we have gone on quite a bit.
it's a marathon.
It is quite a bit. But anyway, that's it for this week. My thanks to Ed Selley,
Oh well, let me go in and say hi.
Kaz Harlow,
Touched you 5 seconds, laid 3 eggs.
and Mark Botwright.
How big can it be?
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark AVForums.com for latest reviews, news and videos. Plus, why not leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes, but only if you enjoyed the show. Also, head over and check out our YouTube channel for videos on the latest product releases, reviews, and feel free to subscribe while you're there. I'm Phil Hinton, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.